You're experiencing the Authentic Chaos Podcast, an exploration into our inner selves and journeys of self-discovery. I'm your host, Vahagan Yarnosian, and joining me today is Tessa Heron. Welcome, Tessa.
What's up, Vahagan?
I see you flowing.
Yeah, it's great to be on Authentic Chaos always.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. I took a little bit of a break because I needed a little bit of a mental cool down and just like to
Mm.
process a lot of things I've been thinking about. So it's nice that you were able to come on kind of short notice and have a chat.
Yeah, that's like so the thing to do, right? I love having a mental health vacation.
Hmm.
It's like I took a hiatus from comedy this summer and I came back like such a celebrity. Like anybody who's everybody has taken a break for mental health reasons.
Yeah.
You know? Olympians, celebrities, everybody does it.
Yeah, like we don't. It's not always as so obvious to us that we need a mental health break. It's not like when
Mm.
you exercise or like exert yourself physically, like your body is literally aching, and that like is like okay, I need a physical break. But mental health and like mental energy, especially, just feels like we don't understand it well enough to know when we are kind of using up our battery.
So true. Yes. Any good workout regimen has rest days built in, right?
Yeah.
And and I don't think that that is such a good point, RE, like mental capacity and strain
Hmm.
to be stressed out, to be juggling a lot for a long period of time. You have to take a day off.
Yeah. I read a book on scarcity, and a big one of the concepts that they were talking about was bandwidth. Like we have a certain amount of mental bandwidth, and maybe it recovers at a certain rate. But if we are constantly doing like pushing ourselves mentally to keep like producing or whatever, we just keep using up our bandwidth. And if our bandwidth is always full and always used, we have no space for other things. And that can be really straining on us.
Yes. I think that's like essentially the business model for like nonprofits. Is like keeping them at such a bandwidth of scarcity that
Hmm.
they can never like organize and actually reform the entire system that causes their existence. You know, they're like filling in these gaps of like social need,
Yeah.
is a basic idea of nonprofits. I think at least. And yeah, I mean, they're doing all of this work that's like just created by all of these systems that put people out. Like they do things like help people recover from domestic violence, or like people who need to get their own housing to get away from like abuse or like any kind of situation. But yeah, anyway, yeah, no, nonprofits, they really run on that scarcity model.
Yeah.
They can't ever like get the same way that it does to people, that you can't ever like reach the next level or stabilize to like springboard up into something new if you're always off,
Yeah, and you
on the
you don't like have
treadmill.
time to learn or like yeah, explore, be creative.
Leisure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
leisure. Leisure is so
Yeah.
important. Like giving yourself the space to be bored, to exercise that like that nothing space where you can just create. That's where like the most
Yeah.
exciting things happen for me at least.
Yeah. Don't you think it's so funny that our country has this in the, I don't know what document, Constitution, the pursuit of happiness? Don't you think that's so like uh something I just don't see a lot of evidence of happening in this country? Like I feel like that means we should have mandatory vacations,
That's a good
pursuits of
question.
happiness.
Do you think how do you think what do you think of as happiness?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with it's such a long journey to get there, It's so complicated. It has to do with having things and people and places that you truly enjoy that really fulfill you and make you happy, and having the time and resources to do those things, and to even know yourself to that extent, to really know what really makes you happy.
So, do you feel
That
like,
takes a lot of leisure.
yeah, do you feel like people even know what their happiness is?
Sometimes I doubt it. I think people will report it, but I don't see it in their eyes.
Yeah. You have to wonder, like, I'm sure some people enjoy, like, the grind, like, being productive. Like, I've heard many people say they love being productive.
Hmm.
But also, I've seen those same people be very stressed and very frustrated and upset and, like, showing a lot of negative emotions to something that they claim they love to do. And so I wonder if is like productivity really the pursuit of happiness? Or is it
Uh,
something that we've thought we need to do to pursue happiness?
yeah, right. And this is a question that I think gets to that, how well do you know yourself as a prerequisite to pursuing happiness? Because there's all these like false summits, in my opinion, about happiness, and like what people generally like strive for. And some of it is really fueled by an external validation or a achievement of, you know, following following the script that you were given. And that can be satisfying to an extent, I think. But I don't think necessarily really fully and very sustainably for everyone. Some people, I truly don't know. I truly think that, like, you know, whatever whatever a super typical way of life is really working for them, you know?
Yeah. And I'm sure there are some who are like genuinely deep down happy. But I think the point that you point out about internal happiness is important. How do you think the internal versus the external happiness compares?
Hmm. I mean, do you mean happiness via external
Well, you said like
validation?
yeah, the external validation. Like you said that some people get
Mhm.
happiness through external validation
Yeah,
versus
yeah.
internal.
Right, right. Yeah, I guess I'm interested in, like, or I couldn't tell if you were asking about like a little bit more like performative happiness. Because there's that too. There's also acting happy under any circumstances. And yeah, I mean, I guess so. The external validation component of happiness is like, I've had different types of people I work with, and some people I really genuinely respect, and I want their validation. I want to do work that impresses them. I want to hear them say they think my work is good because I respect them. But then I've had periods in work where I don't respect anyone I work with. And then I'm like, how am I going to get anything done?
Yeah.
I'm like, and then I have to find ways to really be like, okay, like, what are what are you doing? Like, you have to like get this done somehow. And so then I rethink about it to be more like internally validating. Like, I'll do things that I can demonstrate, or I can practice some skills that I like know I'm good at, like writing or doing some like different, I don't know, like analysis, doing some kind of creative stuff. Um, but yeah, and so then I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm like, I'm doing this for me for different reasons. Not even for this job, not even for this employer, but for actually literally just for me to like practice my skills and like build my skills, from Yeah, which has a different type of satisfaction rather than, you know, receiving a good performance review or good feedback, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. What about outside of work?
Oh, that's a good question. I know work is the most, man, this is like tough. I feel like I'm getting philosophically grilled.
That's what we do here on the Authentic Chaos podcast. But no, no, I mean,
Have you ever thought about being a philosopher?
actually, over the past couple months, I've definitely felt like I'm like shifting into philosopher mode. Like
Totally.
over the past month, I've been just reading a lot, or like over the past year, I've been reading a lot. But like last month, I read a book, like a big book on cognition and consciousness, and like it just got me thinking on like so many different levels that I hadn't really thought too much before.
Yes. Yes. I think it's like a legitimate career path, and I don't even think you need a degree in it to be a philosopher. I think you actually already are a philosopher.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think something like that has always like fit my vibe. Like I've always like wondered how things work and like especially how I work and what I
Yeah.
am. And like now I'm wondering what is I? Mind blown,
Whoa,
right?
dude.
But I don't
Ah,
want
it's
to get
melting.
I don't want to get away from the initial question I had.
Yes, I'm thinking about it still. I was
Okay,
just
okay,
stalling
okay.
a little bit. Um, yeah, so RE validation and uh purpose, right? We're talking
Yeah, yeah,
about
like outside of work, how do
happiness.
you view
Hmm.
happiness?
Wow. I mean, well, I don't know. I really do think it does start with this like moment of calmness and reflection of really, I mean, it is so cheesy, but asking yourself like, what do you need right now?
Why
And
is that
having
cheesy?
it because it is just like so like social work, self-care. Like it's kind of a trope, like, but it's so true.
But it's a
It's
trope
so
for a reason,
true.
right?
Yes,
It's important to
yes.
do.
It's one of those things that, I feel like is a little like it's just a little bit like it's just like gentrification of self-care thing, that you have to like, yeah, that it's like this idea that's being taught that's like only accessible if you have like the right resources to be able to even enter this state of reflection and pursue this, idea of like self-improvement, but yeah. So
Well,
yeah, no, I
but
think it
maybe,
does,
but does it
yeah.
have to be? For instance, I will pose this question to you. If you were born, let's say a couple hundred years earlier, and let's say you were born in a situation where you had your basic needs met, would you be happy?
I don't know, man. Like I guess, I mean, you think it's an intrinsic quality to be happy? Like if I didn't have the same family and parents and upbringing,
I mean, so I do. I like.
what's the
As,
time period have to do?
so
Just
the so
that
the
just
main
that
thing about the
the
time period,
conveniences are less.
yeah,
Yeah.
like if we strip away all of the conveniences, all of the things that we've learned to live with, all of the material things that we thought we've like enjoy now, if without any of that, would you be able to be happy?
Oh, totally. Yeah, you'd probably have less desire, you know? That's the
Yeah,
only
maybe
thing
less
separating
distraction.
us separating us from happiness is our desire.
Ooh, I love that. The only thing separating us from our happiness is our desire. Maybe also, I would say our expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I
feel like
yeah.
less money, less problems, you know?
Yeah. And the less you're used to things being nice and like you having a bunch of things, the less you are expect having a bunch of things and more things. And really like going back to one of our earlier questions of is the how many people do you think really get validation or that deep happiness and fulfillment from material things?
Oh, everyone. Oh, I mean, like literally, all of these things have a cliff effect. It's like, yeah, oh, hell yeah, I love my new TV. And then it's like,
As soon as you
I
turn it
need a new
on,
TV. Yeah, and then it's like for whatever reason, whether it's advertising or your neighbor got a new TV or there's some kind of fucking upgrade to TV that streams in 4G LTRH now, and you have to get a new TV for that. Like, there's always a reason you're going to think that the thing that you have now isn't good enough.
yeah.
So I think it's so unlasting, and it creates such a void in your self-worth. Like if so much of your worth is tied to possessions, even if you have a really stable like income and you can maintain this like wealthy lifestyle, and everyone's like, "Oh, I love your houses and your yachts, whatever." It's like then it puts so much strain on your income, and it puts
Yeah.
so much pressure on your job. Like you have to keep earning money because it's like part of who you are and part of the way people relate to you, and like how you like network and spend time with people.
Yeah. And you have to keep going, growing. That number has to keep going up. So you've got to keep working so that number keeps going up. And you've got to put in more hours so that you can keep working better and get more money so that number keeps going up.
Yes, and crushing civilians under your feet as you go desperately
Yeah. And so
trying to
here's a
maintain.
bit of a maybe it's a rhetorical question, but what is self-worth even worth?
Shit, man. I mean, everything really. Like that's the only thing you have in the end. Uh,
Well, what do you think of it, what do you
it's
think of as self-worth? Is it like the actual like monetary value of things you have, or is worth maybe not even the right word for what you're trying to describe?
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about money actually. I mean, I think so much of self-worth is like a little bit what you tolerate for your world, you know? Like I think that uh some of self-worth is just deciding what you will and won't put up with and why. It's a little bit
Yeah.
about having boundaries, and like you're the only person who can control that, and like you can really determine that. And it depends on how much you believe in it. Like that's so much of self-worth is just being like, I deserve this, I deserve to get whatever I want, whenever I want, whatever I need, and trying to make it happen.
Yeah. It's
Even if you fail, even just the effort.
how do you think you find out what you're worth?
Oh shit. That is a really, really interesting question. How do you find out what you're worth?
Yeah. How have you
I
found out
mean,
what you're worth?
yeah, I mean, I think it's just been a lot of life experiences and people, relationships with people who have quote unquote seen me, recognized me, you know, uh encouraged me, supported me, helped me help me see what I have to offer and to share.
Yeah.
And yeah. And God, I think like more like scientifically, it probably has a lot to do with like your like self-image, self-esteem development, which actually happens like pretty early in life, like around like 7 years old, you know? So like, it has a lot to do with how stable my life was at that time. I had a good family and all of that.
Sure. I think for me, like I like had a pretty poor sense of self value, and I didn't really even consider much of my self value as like in a lot of different contexts. And a big change shift for me was when I started to define my own self value, when I started to reflect on who I was and what I was, and seeing that I'm not like a socially inept like nerd, but I'm this richer, more complex
Mm,
person. I'm like this being full of like thoughts and reflections, and the ability to be patient with myself and with others, and to reflect and to listen and engage and transform and to touch people in like certain ways, like mentally and emotionally, and like really evoke beautiful things within people that I may or may not even know. And I think through that, I realized that my worth is immeasurable, and maybe self-worth isn't the right word, but it's like the inherent value of being a sentient being.
wow. Yes, I totally resonate with that. And and I think that, kind of what you spoke to as far as like being able to see your own journey and where you've come from and where you've gone, and to be able to know that like, at one time I felt this way and I aspired to feel this way, or to kind of build this build this trait or this skill, and I've done it. That can inspire so much self-worth, if
Yeah.
you and it's cool to see that stuff happen, to be able to change yourself and grow and be like, I'd like to strengthen this side of myself, and to be able to practice it and achieve it. That can have a lot of internal happiness, that growth. I think that's a really good one, a good source.
Yeah. And I truly believe you can't really know what your definition of happiness is until you kind of understand yourself and look inward and see who you are and what your needs and values are.
Mm-hmm.
Without that, it's kind of like shooting darts at a wall, or like shooting in the dark. You don't know. You can try a bunch of different things, but if you don't pay attention to how it feels, you'll never know which ones are actually like fulfilling you.
Yes, and I think so many people are doing that and kind of feeling that way, feeling a little just disoriented in their own life direction.
Yeah.
And I understand it because I've been there, and it's just like it's interesting to think about. And I've been in this place of like low self-worth and like really relying on a lot of external validation, and really like it similarly seeking, always seeking, being like, what should I be? Who should I be? What would be a good course to, fit in, to get to the next level, to, earn this respect or approval from whoever you're looking for. And it has this like, right, just kind of like frantic feeling to it of just like it's like trying to chase a moving target when you're seeking that.
Yeah, yeah, and because it is a moving target, because you've tied your happiness to something you can't control, something that's completely outside of you, something that basically is chaotic, this chaotic system. So it become like finding happiness becomes a wild goose chase.
Yes, yes. And everybody's telling you how to get it,
Yeah,
whether
yeah, yeah.
it's a
People are
fucking
telling you how to run
prescription.
faster, how to like be more efficient about trying to catch this goose, how to get like
Yes.
buy my goose catching equipment.
Exactly. Or it's like, yeah, here's a pill that'll make you feel like you caught the
Yeah.
goose.
It's true. We'll take out loans to catch more geese.
Yeah. If you want a goose today, you can pay for it for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Goose payment plan, goose payday advance,
You know,
loan
we're coming
advance.
up with a whole goose-based economy.
Yes. Actually, it actually kind of does sound like fun to chase geese. I mean, it sounds like really frustrating, but like, I don't know. It could be fun, like a little game, like a game that you'd play at Thanksgiving or something.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds fun to do once in a while, but I don't know if I'd want to like tie my happiness to it. If you didn't catch the goose and you're like, I'm gonna have a terrible day now.
I really like that. I feel like that's like a good email signature. I like really don't want to tie my happiness to this. Sign off.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that some people get offended when you kind of exert an opinion like that, especially out in a work environment, because if you are tying your whole soul to this singular endeavor that is outside of you, but like for your nonprofit or your company, whatever, you're spending so many hours, and you hear one of your coworkers say, "Hey, I'm not gonna like tie my happiness to this. I'll get it
Oh,
done when I get
totally.
it
Just
done."
like
Nope, there's hell to pay.
record scratch.
Yeah, everyone's
What?
everyone goes quiet in the office.
But but the deadline though.
Yeah, yeah, the deadline.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, isn't that interesting? I know. I think there is a little bit of a don't break the fourth wall feeling
Oh yeah, oh
in
yeah.
some workplaces where it's, well, don't like talk about like, you know, like the deep shit, you know?
Yeah, yeah. They'll like you mentioned something like that, and yeah, everyone looks at each other all nervous, being like, "So, what's gonna happen?"
It's like, could they possibly be suggesting that they value their own lives over their workplace duties? Are you
Shun,
supposed to talk about that
shun,
here?
shun. Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
I get it. If you felt like you've put so much of your time and your life into this thing, and you see someone so flippantly being like, "Hey, I'm not gonna kill myself over this deadline. If we're a couple days late, does it really matter?" You say, "Yes, it does matter. You know how many
Oh, the
like late nights
enforcers.
I've put in?"
Yes, yes, the enforcers of the culture.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's yeah, I know. They've embodied it, they've internalized it, they've become it
yeah. And
to no one's benefit.
it really is to no one's benefit. And I refer to this as like you adopting your company or your group's needs, right? Like sometimes a group of people, like a nonprofit or a company or a community, they like it becomes an entity that has its own needs. And to enforce those needs, you need to get people to agree to those needs. And so I feel like a lot of people, and I noticed this within myself at a later date upon reflection, that I had adopted my company's needs as my needs. So productivity and
Ah,
efficiency made me feel good because it was good for my company. Solving problems
right.
at work made me feel good because it was good for my career. But none of these were actually unique to the company. Like I solve problems all the time. I just don't have like a company to do it with.
Right. You don't have like a documentation of it, essentially. Like
Yeah.
that's all the company does is like uh make it into products, I guess. Make your
Yeah.
labor and time into things.
Yeah.
Wow.
I had a friend suggest, or maybe I suggested that I think an interesting public experiment that would really help people break out of their mindsets would be if we just microdose the water supply just a little bit. Just
I
enough to give people a nice little buzz.
I was just saying to my friend this weekend, I actually think people kind of need a little bit of a macro dose. I think people might need the full, like, melting away of all societal norms and roles.
But that can be scary.
Total cleanse.
I think what
Yes.
people refer to as ego death, when especially on psychedelics, uh, I think it's when the things you define yourself by get washed away.
Mm-hmm.
And you no longer, you feel like you are a stranger in your own body. Not because you have transcended and have like your soul has been split away from your body, but just because you are experiencing yourself in a new way. It's still
Mm-hmm.
you. It's just you are now using a different perceptive filter to understand you.
Yes, and it gives you the question. The question that's scary is now that I see all of these layers of myself that are not important or not, uh, I don't know, whatever gets stripped away, once I see myself without that, what's left, you know? And that's the scary thing. I think for a lot of people, it's like, oh, once you take the exoskeleton off, it's like there's not much inside, you know?
Yeah.
And I think I feel so lucky to have experimented in psychedelics at such a young age for that reason, because I think it gets scarier and scarier, like the more of your life you build up with this like uh facade of so many things that are just like kind of assigned by like societal statuses and stuff, you know, just like your income, who your friends are, what your job is, who your family is, where you live at, all of that stuff that just like is so important. And it in a day-to-day life, if you know, if you so subscribe to that, um, yeah, to have all of that washed away is like it would cause like a general spiral, downward spiral. Yeah.
But I don't want to, even talking a lot about some of the scarier things.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to emphasize that this is such a small portion of what psychedelics can provide. Psychedelics are a spectrum, and a lot of the things that are scary actually go away with time and experience and with understanding yourself. And I think it's been an important part of my journey of understanding who I am, because it's allowed me to experience myself in new ways and in new non-judgmental ways. And when I remove that judgment, I learn something. I learn something that I appreciate, and I always take away a lesson that helps build on my beliefs and my values.
Yes, and the wonderful thing about psychedelics is that it does have this real tangible effect of retraining your neural pathways. And so, yes, so what you just described almost sounded effortful, you know, to like think about mushrooms as a tool to get to know yourself and better understand yourself. And it's interesting because it's not effortful, you know. That's what the chemical facilitates, is like reducing this effort, and it's just like bam,
Yeah.
like you're just like seeing yourself in a different way, and you're just like whoa. And the good thing is like you can always return to that, you know. It's not something you only experience during this trip and then you lose it forever and you forget it. It's like you can always think about that state of mind and like reflect. And you can always like, yeah, you can always, it's, yeah, it's not a hallucinogenic thing that you like lose. It's like, it brings you closer to yourself, and it's,
The hallucinogens are such a small portion of it. In fact, like I only rarely do I even see like visual hallucinations. A lot of time it's just me noticing things that I really hadn't noticed before, like the intricate movements of trees, or
mm.
or like clouds dissipating up on by, things that I in my normal life I don't give enough attention to. Like, how many times do you watch as the sun burns away clouds and seeing them dissolve right in the sky above you? It's a really cool thing to experience, but because it happens on such a slow time frame, and I feel so distracted all the time, I don't really like stop to pay attention.
Yes, it's so true. Yes. I was camping with my friend this weekend, and we did some mushrooms, and like we are like, yep, this is what we'll do. We're gonna eat these mushrooms and we're gonna go sit in the woods and just sit there. We're taking two chairs, two waters, and we're just like watching the sunset. And it's like 2 hours, and
Oh,
it's like 2 hours until sunset, right?
yeah, yeah,
And like we were talking about this too. We were just like, this feels so good. It feels so good to just like be with some good company, hanging in the forest, watching the leaves fall down, and we were just kind of like, yeah, this is like definitely like part of the, you know, drug induced effect, but also we should do this. Like we should just like make time for like this like quiet like mindfulness, and yeah, we both thought it was interesting that like we wouldn't necessarily just spend our time like that, It doesn't seem
yeah.
like it's enough, right?
It's amazing how little enough is. Like you said, it's almost effortless, and it's not just like the mushrooms themselves that make it effortless. It's like I think it's like a good reminder that to be mindful and how mindfulness becomes effortless. In the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, maybe it becomes like there is a little effort to like build your ability to be aware and your general awareness. But once you do have that, it just comes, and you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to like consciously think about, look at this beautiful scenery around me. You just appreciate the beautiful scenery around you.
Yes, it retrains your brain. Totally. Yeah. And yeah. Oh, I had another thought about something and I lost it.
I do want to ask you because one thing that I've always found interesting about mushrooms, especially, is that there are, no matter what time period or who it is, there are these consistent experiences that people like talk about and write down, um, like like belonging in nature. Right? You felt this
Mm.
like this affinity with nature. How did that feel for you?
Oh, it was so cool. I think some of it has to do with the hallucinogenic effect in that, along with the kaleidoscoping that people talk about, this is what I see when I think about the trees and the clouds is like the wisps of the clouds are just like, shoo, shoo.
Oh yeah,
you
yeah,
know, they're
yeah.
they're dissipating, but they're also like,
Kind
just
of like spiraling a little bit. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
waving around. Yeah.
tessellating. Yeah. Um, but yes, so there's that part that you're like kind of like, whoa, fascinated by these natural things. But like, um, which isn't the same if you're looking at a bookcase in a room, or that if you're looking at like kitchen or something, it's not
Yeah.
like that. Like it's actually like more visually appealing, like the things in nature. But it's also, yeah, it is a feeling. I remember doing some other cactus based
Oh, like
trip,
mescaline?
mescaline.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that I felt so literally connected to the earth. Like I didn't want to walk on the sidewalk. I was like, I want to walk only on the ground. because I can feel the concrete separating me and the earth,
Yeah.
you know? And like I felt like I was like I could feel like the pulse, like the presence of the trees and
Oh,
like their roots under the
yeah.
ground and just like their extensive network. I was just like aware of their uh presence. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's wild, right? Like how like and maybe it's because these are like things that come from nature, but it's crazy to think that just by changing how you perceive things, you feel these relationships that you didn't recognize before.
Mm.
Like on one trip that I had, it was springtime and I was walking through this park full of beautiful trees, and I felt these like deep emotional relationships with trees. Like I like the flowers smelled like it evoked some like really powerful emotions with me that felt like it felt deep and loving.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I love
Natural.
every time I do mushrooms, I need to ground. I need to walk. I love walking on the ground barefoot
Mm.
because do you have you done much grounding or earthing? Are you
I
familiar with it?
didn't know that there was like really a verb like that. So no.
I learned about it like kind of recently, and there is actually science behind this. So like when so the way it works is that when when the light rays from the sun reach the earth, it's absorbed by the plants and stuff, right? Well, upon that absorption, positive ions are left on the surface of the earth. And those positive ions actually can get absorbed through your skin and help balance a lot of the negative ions that you have building up, which is really important for like a lot of mental health effects, which is why a lot of people feel depressed when they're stuck indoors for too long. It's not just not
Mm.
seeing the sun, it's also literally not touching grass, not interacting with nature. And the shoes we have oftentimes have rubber soles, and rubber is an insulator. So you can't get this effect when you're wearing shoes. You have to like actually touch with your skin.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
How do you practice it then? Just with your feet, or do you
yeah.
ever just do
I
like a
just take
full
off my shoes and
skin to
socks
skin?
and start walking
Full
on the ground.
face, full fucking face plant.
If you're really feeling down, yeah, you
I'm
can
feeling
face plant.
deprived. I got a lot of catching up to do. I'm gonna belly flop it.
No, no, just feet will do. Just feet will do. But so I always tell people when you're on shrooms, just try it. Just try. Definitely be outside because inside
Uh-huh.
always to me feels claustrophobic. It doesn't feel the same. I have a compulsion to be outdoors. And, take your shoes off, get connected with the earth around you. Like that's the whole point, to feel this connection with everything, with the things around you. So you might as well get connected.
Yes, yes, and release all inhibition. I think people start to overthink things and they're like, well, yeah, I'd like to do that, but won't I look weird if I'm not wearing shoes? It's just like, yes, and don't ever judge anyone for not wearing shoes again.
Yeah, exactly. But also,
It's just like let go of it and never enforce it again.
you're assuming that anyone's going to pay attention to you.
Yeah, right,
Most people are
right.
so stuck in their own worlds, they're not paying attention to what you're wearing or what you're doing.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, at least around here, they're trying to avoid you.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, but I mean, people get caught up in this. It's like why no one's walking around barefoot now?
Yeah. I mean, also, I wouldn't walk around barefoot in the city because concrete on my bare feet would be kind of painful. And I don't want to
Sure.
like have a bunch of calluses on my feet. So I reserve it. I
Okay.
reserve it for like natural, more natural environments.
Okay. All right. There's limitations.
There's
Okay.
limitations.
You're not going full fucking hippie here.
Yeah, I mean, I blame the concrete. Like, their shoes are very useful for city environments.
Yeah, no one wants calloused feet either,
Hmm.
like in your bed.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't have that. You got to take care of the feet.
So, what are some other things you've learned through some of your trips?
Good questions. I mean, I have my experience with psychedelics was like maybe a little bit I don't know, borderline overdoing it, experimentation when I was younger. And more recently, I've been using it in a more uh, strategic or
Mindful way?
regimented way. Well, yes, mindful, but also like literally regimented, right?
Mm,
Like trying some of these like microdose itineraries. I don't know if
okay.
you've looked into
No, I
these.
haven't heard about these.
Yes, well, there's a couple of different like schools of thought on like microdosing frequency and I've been using it in a way to kind of I have this idea that mushrooms are so good for this like mental cleanse, right? Of just kind of like yeah, being on a just clearing out the cobwebs that build up in your head and just kind of starting with like a clean slate of like you know, who you are, what your intentions are, what your goals and dreams are.
Hmm.
But yeah, the microdosing has been really interesting because it's like a lot more, a lot less like you kind of go about your regular day, right? But you do it in a different way. It just kind of like it's not something that you stop and you're like, I'm going to go sit in the woods
Yeah,
and spend my time outside.
but
It's
it's
like
nice.
it invites that a spirit of that or a piece of that into your daily life. But it also has a little bit of you have this extra energy and you're feeling like this extra like mental stimulation, a little bit more thinking quicker or like making more connections and feeling more sensitive. And it's so good for like creative pursuits. I mean, yeah, it's good for just like, yeah, daily kind of checking. I've kind of like, I guess, like thought about it as like a little bit of a substitution for other substances like alcohol or weed. Like it's like
Hmm. Hmm.
kind of got that still just like a euphoric, like just kind of like chill out after whatever you had to do all day is over. It has kind of that, but it also has a little bit of a stimulant.
Yeah, it's less of a
Uh,
depressant like alcohol.
yeah, yeah. So I've learned through mushrooms, like I really think that it's an excellent daily drug. Or I mean, I think it's like it can be a tool that's used in many different ways. And I think that you can use it on a small scale on a daily basis. And it's like has so few consequences, like I just like can't I can't identify any real like drawbacks.
Hmm.
There's like not like the hangover.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if expense or cost is a thing. I don't really buy that much to like really have it affect me like that, but
I mean, it's certainly a lot cheaper for effect than like alcohol. Like
yeah.
if you want like a beer, it's like $8 sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And it's just like the effects are completely different. I actually feel like I feel a lot more like socially aware and more empathetic, which is a total opposite when it comes to like alcohol. People get oblivious and
Yeah.
like, oversight. They step on people's feelings and stuff. And that, yeah, I'm just like thinking about the different effects and consequences, and like I feel like, yeah, it's just a better choice, like to have a fun night.
I agree. Every time I do mushrooms, I want to dance. I want to
Yeah,
move.
totally.
Like I want to chat. Like I'm so talkative. When I'm like, when I'm drinking, I'm like just feeling like sometimes I'm fighting the urge to like fall asleep.
Right, right. I know. Yeah. And it's interesting because like I think that alcohol is so often it is a depressant, and it's so often
Yeah.
used as a stimulant. Like people will go out to party and get drunk, and there's something to the chemistry of what's going on, and how the effects are actually like, it feels like a stimulant, but it's a depressant.
Hmm.
I wish I knew more about it.
Yeah. I think people forget that we assume that like alcohol and like nicotine and caffeine are like these free things that we can do. And there's
Hmm.
no downside, but like something like psychedelics or weed, that's scary because it can change you. It can change who you are. You can do
Mm.
crazy things. But in reality, all of these drugs have psychoactive components to them. Like when you're on caffeine, you get that caffeine high and that buzz. On nicotine, you get a similar thing and it's very addictive. Alcohol is a depressant, and like all of these things, they don't change who you are. They can bring out certain things about you, but they don't change you. The way you act on these drugs is not is who is based on what you have going on and what you are bringing with you.
Hmm. And the
And
way you habitualize it.
yeah. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, alcohol is more commonly going to bring out the bad things in you. Way more commonly than like psychedelics will. There are certainly cases of people having bad trips, but there are way more cases of people getting angry or upset or sad on alcohol.
Mm. Yes, and I think that this kind of ties back to like people sometimes fears of like diving into this internal facing state that is the trip experience. And that like I think alcohol is like such a great escape from stressors. If you're stressed out, it's like, yep, I'm gonna get buzzed up, and I'm just like not gonna think about that, which is fine. I totally get that that's effective and real to just like not think about it for a while. But like, I feel like I've had times when I've had opportunities or occasions that I'm like, yeah, I could do mushrooms, but I'm actually not feeling mentally good for it. And there's times when it's just like I know that I'm gonna have to face these things if I choose to have this psychedelic experience.
Yeah.
And it's like, and to be able to kind of get through that, or to be able to get yourself in a place where you feel good about where you're at with things, and you're not scared to like dive into things that you've been putting off, or avoiding things. I think that's a real like check-in indicators. Like it's actually a good question. It's like, would you take 3.5 grams of mushrooms right now? And it's like, if you're feeling good enough to do that, like mentally, you're in a good place.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a good check-in.
That's a really good litmus test because you're right.
Yeah.
Like if you're not in a state where if you're in a state where you think you'd have a bad trip, you probably
Hmm.
shouldn't be doing any drugs. You shouldn't be
Mm-mm.
drinking. You shouldn't be like smoking. Like just like there are
Totally.
things that you recognize you need to work on.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just like, yeah, you get busy and you just put it off, and it's like you just let it sit there and simmer for a while.
But like why are we so busy that we don't have the time to work
Mm.
to like deal with our own traumas and our own issues? Like if there's a problem at work, we jump like head
So
first
true.
into it. But if there's a problem with us, we're like, oh, it's fine. I'll ignore it for the next like 10 years and hopefully it won't be a problem later.
So true. I'll put that off for 10 years. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so true, right? And I
Yeah.
think some of the things that you have to confront with yourself are a little uncomfortable and they do take a little like processing. Whether it's like what is this? You know this with your education and skills with computers, like the background processing.
Yeah,
Some
yeah.
stuff you just like let it sit back there, and sometimes you really have to focus on it.
And maybe to tie this to our earlier conversation, maybe we are so many of us are so willing to push these problems off because it doesn't seem worthwhile to work on them.
Mm.
Maybe it's
Mm.
because we don't naturally see the worth in ourselves in like dealing with these issues.
Wow. I
Hot
think it's
take?
so
Is that a
true.
hot take?
Hot take. Right off the presses. Yeah, no, I think that's such a good point too. Is like I think so many people like just continue this perpetuation of their own avoidance and own willingness to live in a state that's less than ideal, and to just be like, well, I can do it. I'm pulling it off. Like I'm covering all my bases, and no one seems to notice. I'm like
I haven't
not.
fallen apart yet.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, that's another interesting component of self-worth is like how immediately do you want to prioritize your needs, How long do you want to put it off and postpone it for more important things?
Yeah, and but what is more important than our own needs?
Nothing.
Yeah, I can't think of anything.
Literally nothing.
Maybe you could say the needs of others if you're feeling altruistic, but I would argue that how can you help others if you haven't like dealt with your own needs first? It's like if you're hungry, you're not going to be able to help someone out with their relationship troubles because you
Hmm.
have this physical need in you. Likewise,
Yeah.
if you are sleep deprived, you can't help anyone with anything because you're like you're not operating at like 100% you. Your bandwidth is like so limited.
Yeah. It's so true. And I would argue that even in the cases of parents and children, in the way that parents are so self-sacrificing to meet their children's needs first,
Yeah.
I feel like that's part of their needs.
I think
You
so too.
know,
Oh
like
yeah.
it's like literally like, beyond their control that they feel that they really need to take care of this child more than themselves, and that like becomes part of their needs.
Yeah.
But it's much different than an external validation. It's not so much like I feel like there's like some like real foundational changes that happens when people have kids that changes all of that they
I
are
think it's the
constantly tired
empathy.
and hungry.
I think it's the empathy you get when you recognize that this other person is just like me, is like an extension, is like very similar to me. In fact, so similar to me
Mm.
that they came from me. So you can't help but have this idea of empathy. In fact,
To care for them is to care for yourself.
this is something I actually reflected on a while back on one of my
Yeah,
trips.
open it
And I
up. Okay, you can pick one and then you have to pick a random one.
okay. And I in fact ended up going on the right page, and so I have this little drawing. I'll try to show it. I don't know if it'll really show very
Wipe off
well.
your computer camera.
There we go.
It's too blurry.
Okay. Well, I tried. Anyway, so I had this idea, this realization that I was thinking about what is empathy, right? How do you
Hmm.
why is empathy such an important emotion for us? And so I'm thinking of the fact that okay, thinking about survival. What do you need for a complex species to survive? Well, if you to overcome a lot of predators that are physically stronger than you, physically faster than you. You need to have this idea that other things outside of you are you, are also you. So, for instance, like we as Homo sapien are social creatures, but we're not the only social creatures, right? The concept of a family develops where you need this. So we start with me, and then we have this concept of a family. So a group of like-minded me's that I recognize as me. But then as we grew from families and we started to develop like small communities or tribes or whatever you want to call them, groups of families that come together and realize that they can support each other's needs. Maybe they can form gathering parties and gather more food, or they can help each other build more shelter. So there's this need to like expand. And then as we grew in population, we had this need for even bigger communities. The first cities started to develop at around like 5000 BC of these independent nomadic peoples coming together to solve even greater problems. And that's when we start to see like language start to develop, or written language starting to develop. And then we see these, and then this builds. And as we had more and more of these cities develop, we had like empires and then countries. And at some point, where does it extend, right? At some point, we'll recognize, oh, we are a global population. So this concept of empathy, I see as an extension of you to others outside of you.
Yes, and in between all of that is all of this division and structuring of society that says, here's this group of people, here's people who have the same race as you, here's people who have the same gender as you, here's people who have the same class as you, income wise, here's who is part of your group in some ways and here's who's not. And yeah, that's the only thing that's going on in between, for whatever reason, that those differences are exploited or you know usable to some people.
Yeah.
That it doesn't seem that we are naturally inclined to understand people in the world globally as our own
Yeah.
selves.
I think it's difficult when we are so used to seeing everyone outside of us as different from us. And the beauty of mushrooms is one of the consistent experiences that people have talked about all throughout the ages that people have done mushrooms is this concept of oneness, this concept that we are all a part of this similar threads, that there's a lot less that's differentiating us than we think there is. If you look down far enough into what makes up what we are, we're all the same. We're all the same, like carbon-based life forms. We're all have very similar DNA. We're all of the same species.
Yes, and I would actually argue that this is part of that ego death experience too, in that to discover that oneness takes all that stripping away of all of those other identities and things that you affiliate with existence that you lose when you've altered your brain state. But like, yeah, you get left with this being of yourself that just is like has nothing to do with all of these earthly tangible things, and it's very vulnerable, and it also has that oneness, like you feel just kind of opened up to the world and you're like, this is it,
Yeah.
this is me, this is all I have. And it's like you have nothing but yourself and your own spirit, and it's like natural, it fits in.
I think that's the important thing, though. You aren't alone. You are a part of this universal fabric. You are, there was one time, one trip where I was enjoying the sun and my feet were on the cool earth, and I felt like this conduit between celestial beings. The energy from the sun, from millions of miles away, came all the way through my skin down to the earth below. What was I but a part of this beautiful system that has no understanding of me, doesn't even notice me, but I am a part of it.
Wow.
And that is how I started to understand self-worth. That it's my self-worth isn't just in what I bring as a collection of thoughts, but also in the fact that I am. I am this conscious sentient being, and I am part of this greater system, just like everyone else. So I don't see myself as having significantly more self-worth than anything else. I see my self-worth as being inherent in being a part of this world.
Do you think philosophers ever did drugs? I feel like we're on the
Oh,
precipice
never. They never
of
did any drugs.
nuh-uh, no, come on. Are you pulling my leg? I
Yeah, of
can't
course they
tell.
did drugs. Everyone
Okay.
was doing drugs back.
Okay.
Mushrooms is actually one of the oldest drug that we have reference to that people have done.
Wow.
It's
Wow. Yes.
even older than alcohol. We know that in I think in Algeria, the cave paintings dating back to 9,000 years ago showed like shamans with mushrooms as part of using them as part of rituals and things like that. It was a crucial part of our societies and probably part of our myth making.
So good. Yeah. I think we were on the I think therefore I am track.
Yeah,
Coming back to a universal truth that some of your self-worth is, and this, kind of comes to this idea of like so much of your self-worth is really guided by your thoughts inside your head, the patterns of thoughts that you have. And to be able to control that and change that is so powerful. Sometimes it feels like self-delusion to be able to reframe your experiences into something that is like a growth mindset frame, or a, think, you know what I mean? Like to be able to like alter your attitude towards things to improve your existence and your reality.
sure. But why? Why does it feel delusional or
Well, I don't think it really is, but I mean, it it feels like one option is to get caught up in stuff and to always be, I'm trying to think of a good example, it's kind of hard
I
to
think I've got it.
describe without,
I
yeah,
might have a good example because this is part of the book that I just finished reading.
yeah.
It was like a book exploring consciousness as the author like understood his own consciousness and through his own readings, and it's really fascinating because it starts with the idea that in math, in formal systems in math, when people were trying to understand all theories about numbers, they found that strange things happen when you have a rule that references itself and negates itself. For instance, if you have a rule set and you say this theorem is not provable in that rule set, well, what happens? really weird things. You get these loops that then build on top of each other. And so going on that, we think of our minds and when we think of our minds, we think of our brains normally. We think of the neural connections and the neurons themselves. And it's well known that people, like, the brain stops developing at about 25. But that's
Mm-hmm.
the hardware of the brain that stops developing. Your thoughts, your conscious, the things that build up who you are and how you understand your mind, that is very malleable. So if the brain is like your hardware, maybe it doesn't change much without like drugs or surgeries, which you want to avoid as much as you can, but your thoughts are the software, and you can change the software. And our consciousness is has this property where it's these like rule systems that can reflect on themselves and then change themselves. And then the act of
Yes.
changing those rules creates a new layer, and that layer has rules, and then you can reflect on that layer and that change those rules, and that creates another layer.
Yes. Yes. So, okay. And I think, wow. Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah.
It's a lot to really reflect
I'm
on.
thinking, yeah. I'm thinking about time as an example of something which is so bound by quote unquote rules as far as calculating, counting minutes in the passage of time, which is ridiculous, right?
I mean, like, what kind of rules do you even mean? Because there are no universal rules of time.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That'd be
Yeah.
like
I'm
that'd be
tired of
like
people fucking
saying
asking
I'm
me to be
counting
on
feet.
time.
Yeah, it'd be like saying I'm counting the distance between for random things. Like, why? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know. I try to explain this to people who are pissed at me for being late, and I'm just like, I'm just like, dude, you're subscribing to something that's just like non-existent. It's invented. Like the time is passing in a qualitative way. You can't
Yeah.
quantify it.
Yeah,
Like,
and our even how we understand time is completely subjective. I've noticed
oh
that
yeah,
my perception of time has slowed relative to like a lot of people my age. Their perception of time increases as they get older. For me, I feel like I've become aware enough that I can slow my time and notice more of my time. And it's not like I've time traveled and that like I can change the time. It's how we understand time is really a mental representation, a mental like representation of like cycles.
totally. And I would add another intrinsic property of a psychedelic trip is that you are, I mean, some of my first trips, I was like completely like obsessed by this. I'm like, what time is it? What time is it? Time is moving so fast. Time is moving so slow. It was so distorted. And
Yeah.
I was just like, what? What? Like I couldn't believe it because it had changed my experience of time so much. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed too that like time goes feels like it goes slower, or
Hmm.
like I just noticed, or maybe it's the other way. It always feels later than it is.
Your experiences feel so full.
Yeah.
It's like I'm always think I'm like, 5 years pass in 5 minutes kind of feeling. Like I'm like, wow, really? It's only been this amount of time. I've had so many thoughts and feelings.
Oh yeah. I had some really exciting thoughts on, well, in the last couple trips especially, but like 2 trips ago, I had some really interesting thoughts that I wrote down in my philosophy journal.
Okay, you can
Okay,
pick you can pick one. You still have to pick a random one.
I have to pick a random one.
Yeah, like just flip to the pages and I'll say stop.
So I have 6 of them. Pick a number 1 through 6.
Okay, 4.
Okay. Okay.
Six what? Entries?
These are part of my personal philosophy. So this one is called Love and Power Seldom Coexist. In any relationship, love and power compete in a zero-sum game. The more love that flourishes, the less room for power and vice versa. Power relies on the enforcement of hierarchy. The relationship between an employee and their boss cannot be one of love when strict hierarchies are enforced. An employee's position at the company and their very relationship with their boss requires the employee to follow the power imbalance. Can a relationship of love devolve to power? Certainly. The most tragic but not rare example is the relationship between a parent and child. The relationship can be tarnished if the parent fails to give up their power that was helpful when their child was defenseless. This power imbalance can become controlling as the parent views their child as an extension of themselves as opposed to an independent, sentient person. How can we reclaim love? Honestly explore and discuss what power imbalances exist in your relationship. Work to either balance the scales of power or, more preferably, explore how you can dismantle these hierarchies. This may seem radical, but it is achievable and opens honest dialogue about the state of the relationship. When power is dismantled, love can blossom.
Wow, dude. Truly a mental giant. I think it's so
Thank you.
true, and I think about it in a gendered way too, in a hetero relationship way too, in that I feel that there are so many uh inauthentic relationships that are based in power dynamics. And some of those power dynamics have to do with things like health insurance, not particularly gendered at all. It's
Yeah.
like, who has the best health insurance?
And
you
that's
know?
oftentimes tied to job here in America.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And of course there's the salary and there's the breadwinning aspect of relationships and power. There's social connections and different ways that creates power in relationships. But yeah, I mean, I think that until we can really get to a point where the power dynamics and genders are changed, and I don't think there is really a lot of opportunities for true love in heterosexual relationships.
Well, but maybe not in general if we look at like power imbalances created through like patriarchal systems, but
Hmm.
I think that individual relationships can tackle this on at that the individual level. You like, and that's why this is more like a call to the people who are listening, who are in these relationships. Like, take the conscious effort to make sure that to like be honest with yourself if there are these power imbalances, and if the power imbalances are getting in the way of love.
Yes, and I think that an essential component to that is both people recognizing the power imbalance that's inherent to gender.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
And that is a disruption of the patriarchy's power in itself, for both people to be able to be like, yeah, you know this is what it's like in society. And it's interesting, right? Because it's like, yeah, I think there's also a lot of power dynamics that don't have to do with money so much as like status. I think there's like a little bit of a feeling that a lot of women are waiting for men to complete their lives or
Yeah.
looking for that. And that's a power dynamic. That's a power imbalance, right?
Oh, definitely,
For to
definitely.
feel that your fulfillment and happiness relies on a relationship. Um, which I don't think that men feel quite as quite the same way, perhaps, but like women feel like a certain like loss of like worth or purpose if they don't have that. And men, it's like, yeah, like bachelor life forever. It's cool. It's fun.
Yeah, it isn't as much of an existential crisis if a man doesn't find a partner. And
Right.
sometimes, like, some of my guy friends will talk about it and be like, yeah, it'd be nice to have someone to, like, clean up and, like, cook or something. And it's like,
Yeah.
why don't you do that? You want a mother?
It'd
And the
be nice
point,
to have some free staff around.
yeah, and they kind of do. Like they kind
Hmm.
of do want a mother, and they because the
Yeah.
patriarchy teaches us that women are the caretakers and women are the emotional providers. Men don't have to work on their emotional needs and figure out who they are on a deeper level because women will take care of that for them.
Yes, yes, which is all part of the a power imbalance and a power imbalance which is socially constructed to devalue emotional intelligence,
Yes.
and it's like almost a weakness. And it's like, yeah, to devalue some of that stuff is constructed and women's strength.
Isn't it funny how
Yeah.
similar structures like patriarchy and capitalism and maybe even some religions in a lot of cases, they're all about shaming us for our emotions or devaluing our
Hmm.
emotions, making us think that we should push those aside, push your needs aside. They don't matter.
Hmm. Totally.
I mean, I can't help but think that there's like similar roots in it. And there kind of is actually. I blame the Greeks. I was interested in like understanding like what was the root of patriarchal thinking, like because the Egyptians were very like women played very important roles in their societies. So what was
Uh-huh.
it? What when did patriarchy start? Like we know that we have like Adam and Eve and like biblical stories which are very like sexist, but like the Greeks wrote those stories. So where did they come from? And it actually has to do with how it seems like it has to do with how Hippocrates understood men versus women on like a medical level, on a biological
Mm.
level, because they couldn't like they didn't have tools for like um, dissecting people, so they didn't know what was on the inside. They only could imagine like what people were like,
Oh my God.
and they noticed that women bled. And so they were like, oh, well, women clearly get a lot of, they bleed a lot, which is, bad, but also bad for their soul. And so in the same time that Hippocrates was coming up with this, Plato was starting to think about the concept of a soul versus body and how the soul and like doing things for the soul is good and righteous and doing things for the body is fine, but like it's mutually exclusive. So if you do good
Mm.
things for your body, you do bad things for your soul. And they realized, oh well, women get a lot of ecstasy from sex, and they thought childbirth. So they're like, oh well, women like if women focused on their soul, their body would deteriorate and they would be miserable. So
Mm.
we have to let women have to just focus on the body, and thus they cannot attain any
Mm.
soul level.
Mm. Interesting. Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Which is, so you see these seeds of what later became like the concepts that are the backbone of Abrahamic religions and capitalism
Mm.
and like how
Mm.
societies are structured today.
Yes, I believe that a women's unique role as life givers is part of the reason that the patriarchy wants control because
Oh,
you
for
guys can't
sure.
do
I think
that.
it's jealousy because that's the
Hmm.
one thing that men or that like males can't do, and men especially can't do.
Yes, it's the most scarce resource, and to put it under their control means uh limiting and minimizing their status as people
Yeah. And it means saying like
to be
women don't
able
have
to,
any
yeah.
worth. It means
Hmm.
diminishing your self worth. And that's why they all like they never liked the idea of psychedelics because it helps
Yeah,
us.
these bitches are panicked. They are, as they should be, as
As
they
they
should
should.
be. Oh, the technology is there. Men are about to be obsolete.
Yes, they are. So
Reproduction sends men.
we've been running a little long, and it's
You
getting a
have to
little
read.
dark.
Oh wait, you did a random
Yeah, yeah,
page.
yeah.
I
Do
don't
you, do you
know.
have any final
That was.
thoughts before we conclude? I can read another one if you want.
I thought your high journal was less structured. I was
Oh,
looking
oh,
for a
oh,
more
sorry.
random
That was
thought.
my philosophy journal. I have my
Yeah,
high
go
journal
back to
here
your
too.
trip journal. Pick one out of your random trip journal. I want to hear a rando out of that.
Okay, okay. This is my most recent one. Cycles are part of our story, but what drives us to want to come back to the beginning? Is it nostalgia, or is there a fundamental truth in these cycles? As I try to focus on putting ink on paper, I am battling the demons of my eternity. But it isn't a demon or a sequence of demons. It's me. This broken writing is me. Am I in these words? Am I in this ink? The sun is bathing me in the glorious warmth. I should take a break. I
Whoa,
am an
man.
I am
Your
an
soul
observer.
almost came out.
I know, right? I am an observer at the edge, but what is the edge? I was imagining a convex edge where the parts that I understood was bound by the edge. But is it bounded or is it birthed? There is no start or end in a cycle, but there is. The loop itself is the start, the end, the everything. The drive to make new life, the drive to consume more resources, the drive to understand, the drive to exist is the same as the drive for stars to consume and end and birth. Math, language, stories, songs, genetic sequences, scars on the landscape is just all an attempt to find us. We aren't just the authentic chaos within us. We are also part of the chaos around us. Being an observer at the edge means maybe recognizing that we aren't in a prison. We're in a womb. This cycle will have no end, and that is beautiful. We are part of these cycles.
That is how you think. That is how you think and write. You're writing all in one stream of
Yeah,
consciousness.
that was my stream. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. My writing style is much different. Yours sounds like it's prose.
That's just how I think. So, it's easy for me to just go. It's fun. It's
Wow.
a lot of fun.
Wow. Wow. Well, thanks for sharing.
And thank you for
Yeah,
joining us, Tessa. It was so much fun to
always.
chat.
We did it.
We did it.
The mushroom showdown finally happened. Oh,
Finally.
it's so good. I really just feel like the benefits the potential it has for changing people's lives is endless.
It's enormous. It's enormous. And I never really understood it until I tried it.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
recommend trying it. Try a little bit. Just a microdose,
Yeah.
just to start off.
Yes. Don't be scared. You might be surprised. And even if you are scared, it's worth it. Come out on the other side.
Yeah. So thank
It,
you again for
every trip
joining us,
ends.
Tessa, and thank you again for listening. If you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, make sure to like and share the podcast, subscribe to the channel, follow us on Instagram for more updates. And I'll be traveling over the course of November, so I might put out some episodes if I can. If not, well, enjoy Thanksgiving. And as always, embrace your chaos with kindness.